In this presentation, I would like to talk about the analysis on the construction accident claim cases with victims brain injured. So I am Dr. Rita E. Manley. I come from Hong Kong Xi'an University, and then my major research lies on construction safety, construction accidents. So for this research, we will try to look at the brain injury. So we will try to look at the traumatic brain injury first. So traumatic brain injury is actually defined by the World Health Organization as an acute brain injury resulting from mechanical injury to the head from the external physical forces. So studies have actually identified work-related TBI as a major cause of mortality and also mobility, and it is a long-term and costly occupational injury. So other factors contributing to the traumatic brain injury that include like age, ambiguity, and also the type of occupation. And the fatality rate and also disability due to injury is especially high in the construction industry. So in Ontario, for example, during hour before and after launch, there is a high frequency of injuries, with younger workers tending to experience injuries in the morning, while older workers, construction workers, tend to get hurt in the late afternoon. So the severity and also duration of the traumatic brain injury influences the unemployment rate and the rehabilitation of the individual who have suffered from the traumatic brain injury can be assessed by the ability to return to work, with those originally engaged in full-time employment often returning to work part-time. So a French study found that most victims of severe traumatic brain injury can return to work after prolonged unemployment. And considering the socio-economic environmental factors, an Australian study found that the return to work rate is higher for people who are single, younger age, and poor generalized cognitive framework. And then for the brain psychology is associated with diverse psychiatric manifestations such as psychosis, mood disorders, and also personality disorders. So experts believe that workers who suffer from the PTSD and concussion in building engineering work, and then some people found that reported that in construction industry, the workers would have the possibility of falling risk because of the less awareness of the construction safety. So falling from height may also result to like PTSD and also concussion. It was suggested that the construction site was one of the places where memory trigger the PTSD for instructors for workers. So they found that actually concussion is possible harms for people doing engineering work. So Liho and Tan that they indicated that there would be some risk for building and construction workers, such as like falling from height and falling objects. These types of risks could also cause the workers to suffer from PTSD, also concussion. So previously there was some people that selected the bricklayers and construction supervisors, and found that both of them had high work pressure and thus were associated with mental symptoms such as depression and also PTSD. So Madano and etc. They found that a wide range of work-related incidents could result in the development of PTSD symptoms, and then they indicated that the construction workers have high rate of PTSD and depression if they witness the accidents. So the material sample methods, in this study, we aim to analyze the court cases in construction accidents causing brain injuries in Hong Kong by searching through the Hong Kong Legal's Information Institute, and in some of these cases, the victims exaggerate the symptoms or malingers. And then in Chun Chen, and also Wiley Scaffolding Company Limited, the plaintiff was dismantling the scaffolding and was hit from the above by a bamboo pole. He claimed that he suffered from the psychiatric symptoms such as dizziness, headache, etc. But then he was found to be alert, conscious, and without any neurological signs, exaggerating his symptoms to two major psychiatric experts, and was diagnosed with the mild degree of the post-conscious disorder and also moderate degree of the PTSD. And later they found that they in consciousness with the previous doctor's report, and also re-examined him and making it the justifications to only a mild to moderate degree of the cognitive deficit And moreover, apart from the doctor's advice, one surveillance videotape during his sick leave period showed no sign of the social disability, and he was chatting cheerfully with his friends. And thus, the justice found that he to be unreliable witness. They exaggerate the claim, which is actually very, very common in Hong Kong, where some workers they want to claim more, and then they exaggerate the claims, and therefore the damages assessed but based on the basis of his mild head injury and post-concussion syndrome. So in other similar cases where there was found the plaintiff was hammering a metal bucket when a piece of metal broke off and hit his chest, and the resulting pain disturbed his lip and resulted in psychiatric problems. And the court held that the plaintiff was not credible witness, malingering, and also like exaggerating his condition. So his claim of poor memory was rejected because of his inconsciousness and also contrary evidence provided during the cross examination, and thus the court inclined to accept psychiatrist's opinion that the plaintiff was only suffering from a mild adjustment disorder rather than like PTSD. And the court rebalanced the available evidence and tend to accept the evidence given by the claimant if he is considered to be honest. So assessing the damages, so in case of the residual symptoms, one factors have to consider in awarding the damages is the residual symptoms. And the court relied on the Ho Yi Mui versus Liu Hong Long and others, and where Mr. Ho suffered mild minor physical injuries and PTSD as a result of accidents. So Mr. Ho's disorder was described to be more serious than that in Mr. Child's case, from mild to moderate with a suicidal tendencies. So yeah, in addition, ongoing sufferings were also taken into consideration, where in Mac's case, the plaintiff was a carpenter and cutting the plywood into loaf who fell down and then let the saw cut his finger, and he was fearful of his previous job and was diagnosed as suffering from PTSD and also depression. The court also takes much factors into consideration of the ongoing pain in his right index fingers and need to go to psychiatric clinic for the assessment of damages. So in any case, the court will try to avoid and balance the evidence given by the experts from different views, and medical experts can only express on the nature of the claimant's injuries, while it is for the court to decide whether the claimant is sufficiently fit to resume his pre-accident work or the extent of the incapacity in the employment market. So in Chan Ho Can versus Mo Man Ho, etc., the plaintiff the plaintiff drainage workers fell from heights when the glass panel that he was sleeping on broke, and thus he suffered from a serious and deep cuts that left a conspicuous scar on his face, and subsequently he suffered from psychiatric injuries such as headache and also dizziness. So a joint report of the neurologist stated that the claimant suffering on his dural fistula is actually a pre-existing defect, and that is not actually related to the case. So, however, the court actually rejected his opinion and then weighed in more evidence given by some of the experts, and then it was held that Mr. Chen was physically unable to lift any weights based on his back pain, poor eyesight, and then phobia of operating machine. And furthermore, the courts took his educational background and his application to various jobs like, for example, watchman, caterer, and car washer into consideration. Eventually, the conclusion was reached, and then he couldn't resume any gainful employment. So this case concerned the plaintiff suffering from PTSD. A plaintiff, a carpenter, and was striking a nail on the wall when the nail broke and injured his side. And later he complained of the subsequent psychiatric problems such as like nightmares, social withdrawal, and also depressive mood. So the key issue was whether the accident was remote and not foreseeable. The method adopted by the plaintiff was hammering. When hammering, whether the size or nail head made no substantial difference. His method enabled him to reasonably foresee that he would break the nail, forcing it to fly off, and injure somebody close to the operation, which was irrelevant to the strength of to the length of their experience, and the foreman failed to provide a safe system work and safety equipment such as goggles, and he failed to ask the carpenters to wear them and tell them that they were available if needed. So in fact, a standard of care for the supervisor is rather high, and they are required to be very careful and considerate to fulfill their common legal duty of care. And then another case that the defendant's failure to keep the vicinity of the work clean of the obstacles, and then in another case where the employer failed to provide the unsafe environment as stated in the Regulation 6 of the factories and also industrial undertakings, woodworkings, machinery regulations. So it is required to keep the forest surrounding a woodworking machine as far as possible. And in contrast, it was decided that the considerable amount of small rubbish debris lying on the forest. So in conclusion, in evaluating the sum of the damages, the court inclined to award credible and also honest claimants. At the same time, it sought to limit those who exaggerate their symptoms. And moreover, the court evaluated all the circumstances of the claimant suffering, even the residual symptoms of the claimant suffering were taken into account on a continuous basis. So weighing the evidence, the court balanced the evidence provided from experts from different views, and they makes justifiable decision considering the importance of safety and to let employers to try every possible means to protect their employees. So thank you for listening. And then if you have any question, you can just feel free to drop me an email at ymli@hksyu.edu. You can also ask the organizers to drop me some emails so that I will try to answer your questions as far as possible. So thank you for listening, and this is the end of my presentation.